But let's kick this for real, man. Jason Angell back on the show, third time. I think we were talking about it before we started. You were on episode 113 and 118, I believe.
Right, something like that. Yeah, that was a couple years ago, I think.
Yeah, it's been a minute, man. 100 episodes
Yeah,
ago. How you been?
that's my fast. Good, man. I've been doing really good. Pushed through COVID, and got a new job. My old one kind of went away because of COVID, but I got another great job, and doing good, man. Kids are growing up fast.
They do that. My
And
son
really,
is my son's gonna be 18 in a few months. I just sent him out. He's while I'm doing this interview, he's taking the bus here in San Diego downtown to go shoot photos and stuff. He's 17. And I'm like, you got to go live, man. Go. You got a free bus pass because you're a minor. Take the bus downtown and go shoot photos and walk around on your own. Spend a little bit of money, kind of understand what it is outside of your parents' house without us hovering over you.
totally agree, man. 100%. That's how you learn.
Yeah. For the people that haven't caught 113 and 118, you want to give them kind of a recap of what we've talked about, or your quick overview of your career?
Yeah, but basically, I think my name is obviously Jason Angell, and I'm a prior enlisted and prior officer. I did 10 years in the Marine Corps. Initially, I came in as a 0311 in '93. Was in for a few years, got out, had a broken leg, went to college, went back in after college in 2001, when I actually with the TBS, and got out in 2008. Did 4 deployments, 3 of them to Iraq. Did the initial invasion with Alpha Company 1-5. And it was a crazy 10 years, I'll be honest with you.
Yeah, dude.
But that's pretty much what it is. So, and this book that I wrote, Running Towards Gunfire, Courage and Brotherhood in Ramadi, is basically about my second deployment. My second deployment, I was a firepower control team leader with 1st ANGLICO. And in August of '05 until March of '06, we were in Ramadi with a brief break in a hit Iraq for about a month. But crazy time for everybody in Iraq, especially in Ramadi, especially in Al Anbar province. And I kind of go through it, like, what we did on a day-to-day basis. And it's a good story for Anglico. It's a good story for the units we work with, like with, 328 BCP brigade, as well as the smaller units. We were in HIT supporting the Mississippi National Guard unit, and all great units, man. It was soldiers and the National Guardsmen and other Marines. Just every day we're out there. That's who was doing it, on the road, doing the work. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's it's been interesting. I have been reading the book. It's been good so far. I appreciate you sending me an advanced copy to check out. I think the cover art's really cool too. I really enjoyed that. I like in the book how you talked about when you were an infantryman. First off, it's crazy that you broke your leg and they let you come back in, especially as an officer. I don't know if they would do that today because of all the medical stuff. I don't know if that's even a possibility.
That's a good story. We kind of talked about it. I was in a vehicle accident. I was dating someone up in Orange County. I'm stationed in San Mateo because back then I was with 3-5, Third Battalion 5th Marines. Driving north, came back one evening, a buddy of mine fell asleep. He fell asleep at the wheel, no seatbelts. This is 1994 in March. Flipped. He got ejected onto I-5, back broken ribs, fibula cracked, punctured lungs, and so it was not deployable. So I switched over to Alpha Company 1-5 enlisted, and then slowly tried to rehab. I was on light duty, but going through, making it happen, and eventually I was a team leader, fire control team leader, but a fire team leader. And I was on a live fire range one day. I was just limping because I was just pushing through it, making it happen. The battalion commander saw that and was like, "You got to talk to the medical doctor. You can't have you out here on a live fire range limping."
Yeah.
100% right. But I was trying to push through it and do the right thing, and I just couldn't do it. So I had to take that break in between, and they let me in. There was a problem because I initially got out with 10% disability. So the Marine Corps was like, my OSO was like, we don't know why they're saying no. Finally, I found out it's because you're on disability. So one day I had to go to Long Beach, the VA hospital there, and I take an X-ray. They looked at my leg. I took up to the officer, that's some naval officer, and he's like, "So why are you here?" I was like, "Well, I'm trying to get off disability. I'm going back in the Marine Corps." Officer, and he's like, "You want to get off disability?" I was like, "Yeah." "Yes, sir." And he's like, "I've never had anybody here want to get off disability." He looked at shit. I was out that day. The senior, easiest thing I've ever done with the VA ever was that day. Trying to get off disability. That was it. One guy did it. There wasn't a chain of nothing. I don't know how to do it now. That
Uh,
was it.
that's cool.
It's,
Yeah, no, that's cool, man. That's awesome that they even let that. That's crazy. You only got 10%. Did you get medically separated before your EAS, right?
yeah.
But
So,
still only got 10% like that. What the hell does that?
it's like $50 a month I didn't see for a few years because I got to pay back the Marine Corps or some weird.
I was gonna ask. That was my next question: is if you had to pay all that disability pay back?
Yeah, you got to pay it back, and
Wow.
you had to pay it back when I went back in. But back then, when you exited, there's this thing like the Marine Corps gives you a lump sum, but then you have to pay the VA, it pays them back, and then you don't get a check for a few years until you pay that back, right? So I got like a $3,500 check when I got out from the Marine Corps as a severance pay.
Mm-hmm.
Then the VA they had to pay with that VA money I got. It went directly to the Marine Corps for until that was paid off.
Yeah.
So I didn't see it until I was almost done with college.
That was happening after the surge. After that was kind of over and things were starting to wind down a little bit in Iraq and Afghanistan. Like when Iraq kind of wrapped up, they were allowing people to get out and they were giving them, what did they call it? I don't remember what they called it, but it was basically a severance package. Like, hey, if you want to get out early, fill out this form. If you qualify, you'll get out and you'll get 50 grand. And it was like some of them were like a lot of money. It was like 30,000, 40, it was like tens of thousands of dollars. And a lot of those guys didn't realize, like you said, when you do that, when you sign that, you're going to get this lump sum from the Marine Corps. When you get out and you say you get 40% disability and it's, I don't know how much that is, like $1,000 a month or whatever, you don't get any of that money until that 40 grand is paid back. And I'm like, well, how is that a benefit?
I was like, some weird bureaucratic math that I didn't know, but I just tried to get $50 that money until I was almost done with college. So
that's so crazy though. I'm like, that's so stupid. Why would I do that? Like, if I want to get out early, I guess that's cool. But like if I'm planning, because some people will budget in, they're like, hey, I'm at 70% disability. I'm going to get this much a month. That's going to be part of their budget while they look for a job, get education, whatever. To not suddenly not get that would be a shock,
Oh yeah, we got to pay it back. Yeah.
Yeah, as you're paying it back. Yeah, that's so crazy though. The other thing I thought was interesting in your book at the beginning of it, where you're talking about how I think you were still in SOI and you saw an ANGLICO team that was out training. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so in the book, when I talk about the first time I ever saw, a unit like ANGLICO, and I didn't really know what those at the time. So we're coming back from the firing range, 8 mile hike. Halfway into, we stop, sit on our packs, drinking water, right? And it's getting closer to it's that late afternoon. We're kind of by a draw there along that road that parallels the draw that parallels the road there in Camp Pendleton. And out of the brush, we see these four Marines come out with these huge packs, right? So we had the Alice pack back then, but they had the Mountain Run. So it was huge. It was packed full of stuff. They had candy paint on. They had boonie cover. Each one of them had a radio whip coming out. Right, so I'm like, what is this? And we're just kind of watching them, and they all kind of get like a Type 360, and a couple of them are on the radio, and you see these two jets come through that canyon, just scream it, and they went up and popped, right? Back and then they did not, they pop, and then they come down, and so it was just a training, right? They're just doing a dry run, and I was watching them. That was cool, and then before you know it, they're gone, right? They're back in the brush doing it. Later that night, after we cleaned weapons and cleaned the barracks, I took time off, so I went down to the SOI PX, right, the little service store there. I wanted to drink some, get a Dr. Pepper, maybe get some Copenhagen or something like that. When I was going in there, we saw those four guys, those four Marines, and one of them was going in as well. And I went up there to get my Copenhagen or my drink. He was right in front of me, and he's just like, started talking to me, hey, what's up, dude? And he's a corporal. And at that time, I was like a PFC, right? And when you're in SOI, I kind of go into that. Everybody wants you to know how they outrank you, because everybody does. So he was just a mature NCO, or I think he was a sergeant, and he was or corporal. He's like, hey, what's up, man? And I asked him what unit he's with. He's the ANGLICO, and he told me what it was. And I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. He's like, oh, yeah, just small teams, jump out of planes. We work with Army, SF. We do by ourselves. I just said, wow, right, because I'm a PFC at the time.
Yeah.
He's just like, yeah, it's not normal grunt shit. I was like, no. And but it was that cool. Kind of neat. And then I didn't hear about it until years later.
Yeah. That's funny because most people they have no idea what ANGLICO is. Like you can talk to a lot of Marines and they're like, what the ANGLICO? What is that? Unless they've ever like directly worked with them, they have no idea who they are or what they're doing.
Yep. remember one time I was on a plane coming back from Al Assad to Ramadi once, and I was on a helicopter, and there's these two Marine grunts, and why they were getting on just two of them, I don't know why, and we are just talking about some other people, and like, where are you with, sir? I was up to Angell, and we just like, oh, like you guys like high speed FOs. I was like, kind of, I guess, but that's what we do, a lot of FO, JTAC, polish. That's what it is. And they're like, that sounds pretty cool, but yeah, most people don't.
Yeah, no, it's and man, you don't realize it until you're there, or maybe even after you leave, like how cool it is, because it sucks for guys that get sent to Anglico straight out of MOS school. And I say that because for a lot of them, that will be the coolest stuff that they'll get to do. If you're a radio operator and your first unit is like first Anglico, your next unit's probably going to be like 7th comm or 5th comm or whatever. I don't even know the comm units, but you know what I'm saying?
Some battalion.
Yeah, you're going to be like working in a comm cage, updating record jackets and shit, and just being miserable, And it's like, I can see why a lot of guys get out after they do their Anglico tour, because, and a lot of people tell them that too. They're like, hey, this is probably the best it's going to get, unless you're planning to try to go to like MARSOC or something like that later on.
Or recon or something, yeah.
The other misconception I always found with Anglico that I thought was funny was that people were like, well, if I go to Anglico, I can become a JTAC, And I'm like, Anglico is actually harder to become a JTAC as an enlisted FO than an artillery unit, because Anglico doesn't send every sergeant 0861 or every 0861. They send the team leader, they send the FIC leaders, and they send like the team chief if they're not already JTACs. At artillery, as soon as you meet the criteria, the minimum criteria, they're screening you because they need them. I always told guys, I was like, if you really want to become a JTAC, like go to like 10th Marines, and as soon as you pick up sergeant, you're going to get looked at. Even probably corporal now, you're going to start getting looked at to become a JTAC, and then go over to Anglico and become like a team chief or something. But
some of those, like my team, had 3 Marines, and 2 of them, they came straight from 0861 school into first Anglico, and so when they're we were back at the base, and you see shenanigans going on, and I was like, look, this they treat you like adults here. You're with some infantry unit or already battalion. You're a PFC. You don't get this much freedom, This is good. Plus, we could also in Anglico, if there was somebody a turd, man, they got rid of them quick. Couldn't do that in the artillery battalion.
Yeah, we ended up sending a couple people to like the ops section or something like that. Or there'd be like a FAP, they'd need someone to go work at the gym or be a gate guard. Every unit has to give up people. For those that don't know, like gate guards and people that work at the gym and shit, a lot of those people are people from other units that get pulled. They make them go do it for like 6 months. And yeah, we would try to send guys to do that. Our Sergeant Major Offutt, who's been on multiple times, he always wanted to send some of the best guys to go do that as like a break. And it's like, no, dude, the guys don't want the break. Like they don't want to go work at the gym. If I'm a good JFO, I want to go out to San Clemente Island. I don't want to sit at the gym and hand out basketballs. But the other thing too, like if you come there as a junior guy, you really miss out on the artillery experience, because Anglico doesn't do as much artillery. You're not in an artillery unit. You do indirect fire, but when I was at 10th Marines, we were going to the field every month. We were doing an artillery shoot every month, and then we had 2 brag shoots a year. So 1 month in like March and 1 month in October, Rolling Thunder. And you can't really replace that kind of experience for learning how to do not only like adjust fire, but register guns, it's just so
There's
many.
A lot to do it.
Yeah, it becomes very repetitive, but it becomes that like brilliance in the basics thing, where you're doing it so much, it just becomes like second nature. Anglico guys don't necessarily get that, because there is a lot of focus on the air side of the house. And there's not like, you're not part of an artillery unit that has organic tubes where you can just go to the field and shoot artillery. You always have to like hop on with someone else or see if they can support. So I always thought that was kind of a bummer and kind of hurt new 0861s by not giving them that opportunity to get some like really in-depth like artillery time. Now I say that being a lap mover also. I was a sergeant lap mover, so I showed up and didn't know anything either, as a sergeant. But had I gone to Anglico, I think I would have probably done worse had I gone rather than going to 10th Marines. When I showed up to 10th Marines as a former mechanic, I didn't know how to plot on a map. I didn't know how to do anything. Like I literally, my one of the other sergeants there, Delara, he literally, like, one of the first days he showed me, like, this is how you plot on a map. You know, you make a point here and then you use your protractor. Like, I was like, oh, protractor, that's cool. You know, I was a mechanic with MLG. We were doing nothing. You know, we were turning wrenches all day. That was my life.
Man, good on you, man. You need them. You need them.
And it was, you know, it was my success later on was all because of Delara and Gunny Klein at the time and those guys that were there that were really real professionals and really understood the job and expected you to learn it. You know what I'm saying? It's like, you got to be here. You got to be into it, you know, and it's indirect fire. It's dangerous. It's, you know, you're shooting artillery rounds. It's an inherently dangerous job. You know, my very first, I was just talking to my brother-in-law about this the other day. My very first call for fire, or no, it wasn't my call for fire. My very first fire mission with 10th Marines, I was with 2nd Battalion, 10th Marines, Camp Lejeune. This was the winter, probably December 2009. And it was my first time in the field with them. And I was in the FSCC tent because they had me, I was a sergeant. So they're like, yeah, you got to start learning how to become a chief. And they were shooting the check round. And the check round landed 50 meters from us. You know, that was my introduction to the artillery world.
Good times, man. Good times.
I remember sitting there. We're sitting there inside the base X tent, and, you know, we got all the radios and everything, and we hear shot, target number, da da da, and you hear like a off in the distance from the round, and I just hear boom, and I'm like, this is my first time in the field, right? This is my first time with them, and I'm like, damn, that's so much louder by the impact area. And somebody was like, that was too loud. And then my Gunny Klein was outside the tent, and he goes, check firing. He just started screaming, and we're like, what the fuck? And we came out, and we're like, where did it hit? And he's like, right there, dude. It was like 50 meters from, in a spot, the exact same spot that range control tried to make us move our base X tent to. Because they were afraid of erosion. You know, this was the, you know, when you're heading on Camp Lejeune, if you're heading from the main side area out to like the beach, they have that split there, and there's that OP. What's that, OP3, OP5?
I never been to Lejeune. I was Pendleton the whole time.
Oh, no way.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, anyway, there's an OP out there with like a little hill on it, and we were set up on the hill next to the OP, and range control tried to get us to come and move off that hillside. They're like, yeah, it's causing erosion and this. And he pointed to a spot and was like, move your stuff there. And our gunny was like, hey, man, we're fully set up. We're getting ready to start, you know, prosecuting fire missions or, you know, training. Can we just move our vehicles? And he's like, yeah, just move the vehicles off the hill. You know, next time don't set up here. And we're like, okay. And then a couple hours later, a round lands right where he told us to set up. And we were like, holy shit, dude. Yep. So crazy. But yeah,
I'm sure nobody got fired from that, huh?
What's that?
I'm sure somebody got fired for that.
Dude. Oh, man. So what happened was the powder monkey, the guy that puts the powder in the gun, only put half the charge he was supposed to. It was supposed to be like 2 powder bags or whatever. And
yeah, the gun chief's supposed to check that.
The chief didn't verify it, and they fired it like that. On the check round, too. Can you imagine? And they fired it, and afterwards I heard that the gun chief got fired. He got a safety card pulled. For those that don't know, to become a chief on a gun or in like the FDC, they have to take like what's called a safety test. And you want to explain what that is? Because I've never had to take it.
Yeah, there's a whole test that they go through that, you know, the parameters of running the gun and what the max elevation for this, and you know, there's a whole crew that goes through it. But they got to have a safety card.
Yeah, you have to take this safety test to get your safety card so that you can become a fire chief. Or
we do a different one. We do a different one for test or safety test, but.
They started considering doing one for 6-1s before I left 10th Marines. They were talking about possibly instituting one for 0861s as well, the forward observers. So anyways, the gun chief lost his safety card for like 2 weeks. They had him retake the test, and then he was back to being a gun chief. No one got fired. No one got relieved. Nothing. I was like, this is fucking bullshit, man. And it's funny, like a month ago, David Armstrong, who hosts the Moments in Leadership podcast, who's an former artillery officer, he was put something on social media and was talking about how, you know, people's careers shouldn't be ended because of like a mistake. I think he was talking about, I have to look it up, but I think he was talking about an incident in 29 Palms where an artillery round almost hit a vehicle, or maybe did hit a vehicle like a few years ago. And someone didn't get fired for it, and that guy ended up going off and doing something great. And he was like, you know, what would have happened had they fired this dude, you know, or something like that. And I was like, man, I'll tell you what, being on the receiving end of someone fucking up, putting in our, you know, the right stuff in the gun and almost hitting us, like, that's not cool. So I get it. Like, people should get second chances and shit like that. But once you like threaten someone's life, you know, it's hard for me to justify giving somebody a second chance in that kind of situation, because you've already proved that you could fuck it off. And maybe his take was, now that guy will come back and never make that mistake again, you know, because he's going to be so like, oh my God, like, I can't believe I did that. I'm going to be better forever. And which I get that take. I understand that, but I don't know. It's hard to be on the receiving end of a fucking round, you know, almost hitting you. And
I mean, you're lucky nobody got killed. I mean,
dude, so lucky, because it landed 50 meters from us, and then not too far away was the battalion command post. It was like a couple hundred meters away, one direction. And then we had I think a machine gun team or something like that, or maybe a mortar team that was up by the berm next to the impact area. So it landed between three groups of people. It was so crazy, you know, but that happens. You know, these incidents occur in fire support. I mean,
but they're always, whenever I saw, so like somebody would shoot out, and they do the investigation, figure out whose fault was the FTO that wasn't doing on his game, and they fired FTO. They fired, you know, gun crews, and they did left and right, and some accountability, you know. And again, it's tough to support that, and you know, find out, you know, $80 billion is missing from Afghanistan. It's not one general's fired.
Yeah.
You know, or, you know, it's like, where's that accountability stopping somewhere?
Yeah.
I think you need it on these units. It's gotta be tough.
Accountability's fucked up right now for all levels of government. You know, we were talking about it, you know, I'm going to put it in the extra content on Patreon, but we were talking about it before we jumped onto the official like start of the podcast. People can go check that out, but I don't know, the accountability, people are afraid to tell someone that they did a bad job. I don't know why. They're afraid to put it on paper. Like, you suck, you know? And in our profession, you have to tell people that, because you're putting people's lives at risk. You know, being afraid to tell this guy he sucks ends up with him doing something stupid that may kill this guy or that guy. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just, I don't know. It's a dangerous job. It's inherently dangerous.
You don't want to fire everybody, and because then people start to get risk averse. You know, so it's a fine line. You got to have good. You know, you can't hammer everybody, but then again, you got to hammer some.
Definitely. People should be allowed to make mistakes. There should not be a zero. What do they call it? Zero defect mentality. You know, we call that a zero defect mentality, and I think that is an issue, more so when it comes for like discipline and stuff like that. I'd be more lenient with someone that if it's a disciplinary thing. Maybe a guy gets a DUI or something, or maybe a guy he gets in a fight, you know, and you find out the circumstances, it wasn't necessarily, you know, maybe I would have gotten in a fight in that situation. Should we burn that guy and ruin his career over it? Maybe not. That's different than shooting a fucking artillery round and almost killing people. You know what I'm saying? Like,
that's right, man. It is. You're 100% right.
But the job is inherently dangerous. We also had that artillery piece explode in 2011 when they were loading it at Fort Bragg, you know, and that was nobody's fault. That was just a bad fuse that got sent from the factory. But yeah, man, it's just, I don't know. Did you guys ever have any kind of incidents like that when you were in?
Yeah, we had some people shoot out, you know, for whatever reason, you do a battalion shoot or a regimental X or something like that. I spent most of my time in the fires because we were either training for OIF-1, so they stayed as FO for that whole year, and then I deployed to the one, you know, that's a year and a half now, and then I get FDO, and I was FDO for about a year. And when I was the FDO, I never shot out, but you know, there's some things almost happened. That's why you have all these checks, right? You know, fires chief is checking me, et cetera, the whole thing. It's the FDO chief and all that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I've said it on the show a million times.
Make mistakes.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean they do. And I've said it on the show a million times, but these rules are written in blood. The reason that we have a lot of these rules is because someone got killed or something happened, an incident occurred where it showed this flaw in our system, so we fixed it by instituting, charts and darts is bumping off of for we're talking artillery terms, people have no idea what we're talking about. So let's start shooting out. Shooting out means shooting outside the safety box.
Safety zone. Safety box, yeah.
Within the impact area. So on base, there's a huge open area called an impact area where they shoot all the indirect fire stuff. And within that area, the artillery unit is assigned a safety box. They have to shoot within inside that. So it's like a buffer for a buffer kind of deal. And they may shoot outside of the safety box, but still be in the impact area. But that's still a big deal because they shot where they weren't supposed to. Something happened. And then, yeah, like I said, charts and darts, that's the FDC. I don't even think they do charts and darts anymore. Someone told me they don't even do that anymore.
Yeah, it's all computerized now, I'm assuming.
That's crazy, man. I can't,
We had to have a BCS backup. So we did both. We had the BCS and we had a chart. So you backed up with manual. So you had two, right? So the BCS would come up with something and then they backed it up with the manual. And make sure it was checks and checks. So I don't know. I don't know what they do now.
Yeah. The charts, and what we're talking about is the FDC, the Fire Direction Control. Those are the guys that formulate the data. So me as the observer, I call in and give them like, here's the target location. They do all the math to go, hey, this gun's elevation needs to be here. It needs to be traversed or whatever at this angle. Here's all the elevation data and powder and everything like that so that we hit the target. And if they mess that up, you have a round land 50 meters from you, and that's what happens. But good times, man. It's just a naturally dangerous job. I almost got hit by a piece of shrapnel from naval gunfire one time. Had it skip between me and the instructor.
That's a close call.
Dude, we were sitting there talking. We were on San Clemente Island, and you've been out there, I'm sure. Those artillery pieces on the beach? And you got, what's that OP that's out on the point, like China Point or something like that?
I don't remember the names.
Yeah, I think it's China Point, and then you're looking down on the beach, and there's like artillery pieces like on the beach that we would shoot at. And one of my buddies was doing his call for fire, and the rounds for naval gunfire land long and short along the gun target line. And these were right on the beach, and what happened was the rounds were hitting the water also. Well, apparently, if the rounds hit the water, it can cause a shrapnel to go farther than it normally would. I don't know why. Someone out there can explain it. But that's what I was told. And we were standing there, and I was sitting there talking to one of the naval gunfire instructors, and we were just bullshitting about something. And then all of a sudden, it was just like, pew! This weird noise, and like dust kicked up between our feet. We're standing right next to each other. This dust kicked up between our feet, and I looked back, and this jagged piece of metal the size of my hand kept flying and landed in the back of a pickup truck that we had out there. And I was like, what the fuck? And he was like, that would have hurt, but you would have been okay if it would have hit. And I'm like, dude, what are you talking about? Like,
take your leg off.
Yeah. If not take it off, at least open it up and you're on San Clemente Island. You're not getting to a hospital anytime quick, Yeah. It's good stuff though, man. Let's talk about you going to Iraq with Anglico. I don't think we've ever gotten into that, have we?
A little bit. I think we touched on it.
Let's talk. Well, when you guys were doing your workup, or what? I guess kind of explain to us who you were with. You were with First Anglico, if I remember correctly. Kind of explain your breakdown of your team, and then how you guys got the word of where you're deploying and how you got ready for that.
I showed up to First Anglico in April 2005, and we were deployed in August 2005. Showed up. They already had, hey, this is your team. I had a team chief, I had a comms chief, and I had another fire 0861 with us on the team. Great guys, two of them brand new, but one was older. One had been with an Army, one of the Army divisions, the 82nd Airborne, and then he was actually a mechanic and became an 0861 when he was in the Marine Corps. And then one was just a young guy from John Curidan from Nevada. Tad Dyer, which had been to Iraq and with First Anglico, his team leader was wounded during that push into Fallujah. So I had an experienced guy, two younger guys, but still mature, all of them, right? And get there training right off, going to Yuma, training everywhere we're going. Then I got pulled to go to TSP school. For those who don't know, TSP school is how you become a JTAC, Joint Terminal Attack Controller. And nowadays, you have to have this bureaucratic certification to drop bombs, right, safely within close proximity to troops. And that was it. Just getting prepared, going back and forth, doing a lot of training. And I was actually happy with a lot of it. We weren't just doing sit on the hill calling air, sit on the hill calling RDs and mortars. We were doing shooting, moving, patrolling. We had Royal Marines out there with us. We were doing hide sites. We were doing a lot of good stuff, a lot of night work, convoy ops, and Major Grimes was the platoon commander at the time. Now he's Lieutenant Colonel Grimes, retired, but he had, like I said, go in the book is, he had young lance corporals leading convoys. They had to react to stuff. And it was good training. It allowed us to do fire and movement with our team, working together, and it was a lot of shooting. I was happy. Big, got more mount. We had some mount. I kind of go in the book. I kind of go into why there were some issues. Some people didn't think we needed mount training because we weren't going to clear houses. But actually, when I was in Ramadi, we were. We were doing that task force, and it was 12 men. And you're 4 of 12 men. You're clearing rooms.
Mm-hmm.
So it behooves us to have that right training. We're not some fact sitting next to a battalion commander that's an infantry goal. Right? You're out there doing real work, and that's what we did at least. That's what we trained. Overall, I was pretty happy with the weapons. I mean, we got all M4s, all kinds of optics, everything.
Yeah.
And so I haven't seen so much money get thrown at us. It was crazy.
Hey, let's pause real quick because there's something with your microphone. It's like coming in and out. So we were talking about the team going to Iraq. Now, did you guys know where you were going and who you'd be supporting?
Yeah. We knew. Hey, we're right off. Hey, this is the early summer, late spring of 2005. So you're really seeing this flaring up in Iraq, right?
Mm-hmm.
Fallujah had been cleared the previous fall, but now a lot of those fighters are headed. They lived or escaped went to Ramadi, and Ramadi was blowing up crazy, and a lot of attacks. 2-4 was there after the fall. They had decimating casualties. They were in the thick of it. And they were fighting. They had a lot of casualties. I mean, just you see Ramadi all the time. Suicide bombers, attacks, explosions, KIA, and be honest with you, you're like Ramadi. A lot of us want to go to Fallujah. We thought it was still crazy, but it really wasn't compared to Ramadi at the time. And that's what we realized. And so who are you going to be supporting? The National Guard. We're like, okay, National Guard, 228. So brigade, and that's what we did. And there were Marines in Ramadi at the time. When we showed up, it was 1-5 was just leaving, and they were in downtown Ramadi, securing the government center, and they had taken some casualties as well, and it was no joke during that time. It was a dangerous city, and I think I mentioned in the book at the time it was considered the most dangerous city in the world,
mm-hmm.
and just by the sheer attacks on coalition forces, on civilians, on each other, and just the death and destruction that was going off. I mean, bombed out buildings, and it was crazy, man.
Yeah,
it was something else.
I heard that from guys that went to Ramadi. I know one guy, he was saying like he was in Ramadi during the clear of Fallujah, and he's like, yeah, well, everybody talks about Fallujah, rightfully so. He's like, but when they offered, they circled Fallujah and allowed people to leave the city. They're dropping pamphlets and telling people to leave. If you're not a fighter, get out of the city. Well, a lot of fighters left the city also. And he's like, all of those fighters left and came to Ramadi. He's like, so now we're dealing with all this shit over here, so it just became like a huge headache there.
And they were never gonna clear it, right? So God told there was always talk about, hey, we're gonna clear Ramadi. We're gonna start just clearing one day from one side, just kind of like similar to Fallujah, a little bit different, but they never. And that we knew that we could do it with the right amount of people, right? The right amount of soldiers and Marines. You could do it if you gave us the tools. But it was an election year, getting close to an election year. 2006, a congressional election year. They weren't doing that in Ramadi. Yeah. It was provisional capital of Al Anbar province, and we knew they weren't going to do it, and and they never did. So,
do you think? I mean, how effective would that have been?
I know how effective would it? It would have just been attrition, and then they left, and I know, and it would have made probably a bad situation worse. But at the time, and it's going through it was nothing but attrition. We were doing nothing but reacting.
Yeah.
Right. You go on a patrol. IED. Right. So when we showed up, some of the first missions we got into was QRF. So a fire power control team would be assigned to the QRF, and it would rotate every day, right? So when you're on QOF, usually those calls came out. It sounds cool, right? Well, I'm gonna head out there and they're gonna interrupt the firefight. 90% of the time, it was reacting to IEDs. Hey, we need to escort EOD out to this grid way out on Route Mobile or on Michigan somewhere, and wait there for EOD to disable it and head home. That's mostly what QRF was, and it became a mostly IEDs and Western Ramadi was I was at the time. Some small arms fire, a lot of indirect fire, but IEDs were killing them. IEDs were killing everybody just all constantly, and there was some small arms attacks, but most at that time it was IEDs. Now Eastern Ramadi is completely different, and for whatever reason, I don't know, different clans or whatever the case is, and but that was a lot more deadly, a lot more direct fires than trying to assault through OPs, right? They took over a couple OPs with the insurgents
in Eastern Ramadi or where you were at.
Eastern Ramadi, Eastern Ramadi,
Okay.
And then Central Ramadi too, right? So I mean, when the Marines, I think they were 2-4, they got there are the OP, the snipers, and they got overrun. They got somebody came up behind them, and that's what you're dealing with in that part. Really dangerous.
I remember that.
Really bold insurgents. Western Ramadi started bold. IEDs was the name of the game there, and that was.
What did the IEDs look like for you guys?
All of them, most of them, 155 rounds. So, because once the invasion, people just went and grabbed weapons. All the ordnance was unguarded. They just grabbed it and hit it, and most of it was 155 rounds. They double stack them, or maybe a mortar round. They'd hide them in all kinds of things, right? Go in the book, they were hiding them in dead animals and in tires along the rail guards. So what did we do? We took all the rail guards off these mass highways, and so it was always doing something, burying it, and then it was mostly victim initiated or a command detonator, right? So somebody had to be watching you with a wire or an electronic base station. They would detonate it. This was before a lot of the victim initiated, right? So victim initiated IEDs are when you run over a mine or you run over a pressure plate and the IED goes off. But command detonators when somebody's watching you and blows it.
Yeah,
and that's what it was.
Yeah, I remember seeing briefings about the showing photos of the 155 rounds stacked, and that's 155 millimeter artillery rounds for those that don't know.
About
strapped
pounds
to the,
of.
Yeah, they were all like strapped to the back of, like you said, the barriers and stuff like that. So they were hidden. There was another thing they were doing too that was pretty wild. They had like cars where they cut a huge hole in the trunk where they could see the ground, and a car would just pull up and pull over, and you would just think it's some car pulled over, but really there's a guy in the trunk with a giant hole in it, and he's digging into the ground and then placing an IED without you being able to see it because he's inside the car still. I was like, damn.
I go that little bit too. I was like, they started, instead of one guy doing everything, they'd have one guy would dig a hole or excavate a previous blast hole. Another guy would drop in the ordnance. Another guy would connect it. Different ways, different teams doing different things, and they got paid. So these are insurgents based on they needed to feed their children or their ideological insurgents. But it was ingenious. There was one, they even put a couple 155s over a live donkey, and kind of try to get that donkey go towards like Hurricane Point, which was a Marine strong point there in Ramadi, and of course they killed the animal and had EOD remove the rounds. But that's just kind of what that city was, and SBB it is, right? So dump truck full of explosives hitting entry control points, and then there are always orange dump trucks too, and so you're looking to, so as a JTAC, you're looking, hey, do you see any dump trucks? Do you see any big vehicles coming around? Hey, we see a couple of vehicles to the west. So you're doing that type of stuff, but that's what you're dealing with. Any type of big dump truck turns down the road, is this guy going to blow you up?
Yeah.
You don't, and then you do escalation of force if you have time, or you kill the guy. So the city was very dangerous.
And it's a city, so there's naturally just dump trucks doing their day-to-day stuff.
Yeah, you've been in Iraq. It looks like they just do nothing but dump dirt everywhere. There's always piles of dirt everywhere. I never understood what they're doing with it all. But you're right, people are working, doing whatever they got to do, made the wrong turn or something like that, or they're insurgents. It was crazy.
I remember one time when I was in Sangin in Afghanistan, we were going through the bazaar, and the day before, there was south of us in Lashkar or something like that, there was a British vehicle that had been blown up and killed like 5 Brits by a VBID, by SVBID, so a suicide vehicle borne IED. And You know, basically a car bomb, and they were like kind of be on the lookout for it. Like they drove right into the vehicle and blew up. You know, there's nothing you can do about that. And we were going through the bazaar in Sangin. Our driver for my truck had gotten sent home for emergency leave for some stuff. And so I was driving, and I remember driving, and I was going through, and there's a bridge when you're heading south. There's a bridge that you cross over, and we're getting close to that bridge, and there was this car flying towards us. I mean, it was just going super fast, and I'm like, what the fuck? And he was in his lane, and we were in our lane, and he was just flying towards us, and he kind of, it looked like at the last second, he like swerved towards us, like he was going to run into us. And I was like, when I saw it happen, I just like closed my eyes and braced because I was just waiting for that explosion. It was going to hit right next to me, right next to my door. And I just waited, and nothing happened, and he kept going. And I looked at my captain, who was in the vehicle commander seat, in the passenger seat, and he looked at me, and I was like, dude, what the fuck, you know? And what it was he was going super fast, and there was a speed bump at the end of the bridge, and he didn't want to slow down, but on the speed bump, there was like a little gap in the middle, and he was trying to get his wheel between that little gap. And I was like, man, if that would have been a V-bid, there was nothing we could have done. Like, we would have been... And I'll be honest, that fucked with me more than a lot of stuff. That sat with me for a long time because I was like, you're so helpless in that kind of situation. Like, had that dude blown up, you know, had that been a V-bid, like, I would have just had to have eaten it. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know.
That feeling, too, is like in... You know, I briefly go into it in the introduction in the book too, but you have that feeling of just it's always something going to happen. You're just like, you know, like I said, you kind of just you're driving around. You're into some trash because they like to hide them in trash, right? They hide the explosives in trash. So big piles of trees. You try to stick to the middle of the road, right, instead of the sides. You know, left and right, just stick it to the middle of the road as much as you could, because the sides of the roads where they're planting them, and so you kind of just trash. You'd lean over and expect a blast. It was.
Yeah, that shit was the worst. We had them again south of the bazaar. We watched them put in an IED under a culvert under the road, and we were trying to run strikes on them. This guy Stork, who was the BLT's JTAC, was trying to get a run with Harriers on them, and the fucking command was so stupid they didn't approve it. And the one time that it was like everything lined up, the Harrier was coming in because they were doing what you were saying. They were coming out. Place the jug, come out, run the wire, you know, come out, you know, they were doing it piece by piece, and we're watching the whole thing. And the whole time, the JTAC Stork Alcala is his name, was trying to get a Harrier set up to when they come out of this compound to strike them, because they wouldn't let us strike the compound, because it was a compound, even though there was no roof on this compound because it had been blown up before, and we could see into it, and you could see a RPG and a machine gun leaning against the wall. You know what I'm saying? They still wouldn't let us strike the compound. So
what command is saying no to that?
3rd Battalion, 4th Marines, man. Fuck those guys. That battalion commander, and don't get me wrong, like the Marines are cool, but I hated that battalion commander. So first off, we were trying to get the timing right, so when they come out of the building, we can get the strike done. So Stork is working the Harrier and basically having them on call to push, you know, for the strike. And finally, the battalion CO or COC radios and says the mission's approved. So he's, you know, Harrier is on his end call or on his end run, getting ready to drop some ordnance on this dude as he's making his way out to the culvert. And the company commander goes, "Hey, check fire." You know, like he's like on the phone with the COC or on the radio or something, and he's like, "Hey, check fire. You know, don't shoot, it's abort or whatever." He said abort, and we're like, "What? Oh, abort." And he's like, "State reason for abort." And we're like, "You know, what's going on?" He's like, the company commander was like, "I just want to make sure the battalion commander is okay with this." And we're like, "What are you talking about? He already gave us approval." Like,
oh, man.
It was so frustrating, dude. It was so fucking frustrating. I hated that. I hated that battalion like leadership when I was there, just because it was always some shit like that. I was pinned on a rooftop. I was getting shot at. I was laying on a rooftop as flat as I could with rounds flying over my face. And I had a Soldier ISR, which is the little eyepiece where you can see what the pod is looking at, the aircraft pod is looking at. And I had a Harrier on station, and we had a guy shooting at us, and he was up against a mud wall. And the command wouldn't let us drop any ordnance on him because he was next to a mud wall in a field. They considered that a compound. So I'm like, dude, I'm laying flat here trying not to get my fucking head shot off. Or you guys are in a command center going, no, not yet. Let's wait. And I'm like,
See, here's one thing I thought about Ramadi and that leadership there at the time. Just when I was there for that second deployment was, those different units, whether it was the National Guard, whether it was the Marine Corps battalions there, or eventually like the first, the 506, what we started working with from the Army's 101st, they were like really clear of, yeah, go ahead, approve. They approved shit that, to be honest with you, they probably shouldn't approve. Thinking back about something, I'm like, maybe you shouldn't approve that. But at the time, you're in the thick of it, right? And
yeah.
and I think that, I'm tired of getting shot at. Let's go ahead and do this. And they're like, approved. They're like, okay, yeah, go ahead. I think they denied us once. We wanted to bring in one of my guy, my team, John, wanted to bring in some mortars, and we were fighting around the Ramadi soccer stadium, and they initially denied it. But then when I had Harriers coming in for a gun run, they approved it. I was like, well, no, we can't now because we got the Harriers inbound already. But so they were good about approving stuff, especially airstrikes. And
yeah, I mean,
quick.
the battalion leadership really sets the tone, and it was completely different when I was with 3rd Battalion, 6th Marines on deployment to Marja. Real quick too, Lieutenant Colonel Schmidt, that was my battalion commander. I just found out like a couple days ago, passed away. So that sucks. He was a super cool guy, the battalion commander, probably one of the best battalion commanders I ever worked with. He very much would have been a good enlisted guy. I remember the first time I met him, he came over to 10th Marines to meet me because I was coming to be their fires chief. And he walked in and pulled a spitter out of his cargo pocket. He had a crumpled up water bottle. This is a lieutenant colonel, and he no skivvy shirt.
Love it. Yeah,
he didn't wear a skivvy shirt. In his rifle, I remember he had an M4 stock on his rifle, but he had a 20-inch barrel on it. And we were like, why is that? And he's like, oh, you get better range out of the 20-inch barrel. And I'm like, they had to pull him back because they ran into a possible IED when we were in Afghanistan. And he got out, and we had, I don't know if you've heard of this, but we had these things called a sickle stick at the time. And it's basically, it's like a 20-foot pole, maybe 20 feet, with a little hook on the end of it. And you would lay down to investigate what you think is like a IED. Like if you think there's like a wire or pressure plate, you lay it down on the dirt beyond it and scrape towards it until it caught something. And then you would be like, okay, well, the battalion commander is trying to do this. And they're like, sir, let us get he was just that guy. But he was complete. He recently passed away. I just found out, which is kind of a bummer to hear. But when I was with him, we were in Marja, and we were moving the battalion main from FOB Marja up to there was another FOB. I can't remember the name of it now, but we're moving there. And I remember when we got there, he came into the COC and he's like, Kramer, he's like, we're new in the neighborhood. And he's like, find me a target to hit with HIMARS. And I'm like, okay, good to go, sir. And I looked at the S2 guy, the intel guy.
Target?
I looked at the intel guy. I was like, hey man, start finding the target. That was his thing, is like he was, and that doesn't mean that he was out blowing stuff up, because we definitely denied a bunch of fire missions because of compounds and stuff like that. But he was okay with being aggressive when the time for it, was there, right?
Right.
Which 3-4 when I was with those guys was completely opposite.
Yeah, there's a lot of I thought there's a lot of risk aversion some units though too. So when we were initially in Ramadi, so in October, the end of October, for a month we had to all hit Iraq for a month, just my team. So we got a convoy, hit Al Assad. We went toward Hit, which is which is north of Ramadi along the Euphrates, and we were with a Mississippi National Guard unit. And I'll be honest with you, and these weren't even infantry guys; these are artillery battalion that was been doing provisional infantry for the last year. So they're part of that initial 155 BCT, and they got pulled, and they were in Hit for a couple months, and they were doing patrols. They had squad. They had tanks. I mean, and they were not afraid to engage and give me clearance and stuff. And I like those units, man. I like working with those units, because they were just like, you know what, we might not. It looks like you went to a family reunion and handed out camis, right? You had old guys, You had very young guys, you had relatives in the units, because they're National Guard.
National Guard, yeah.
Yeah, and they're all, so that was different. But to be honest with you, they fought, and they had KIAs, but they weren't scared, man. They were doing it, and but we had to deal with a lot of their higher level was part of RCT 7 or RCT 2, based out of Al Assad, which was different than Ramadi. So we kind of had to go a different route there.
Mm-hmm.
And so we got a lot of pushback on stuff we were doing. So I was blowing up. We got attacked one day. The insurgents hit us, RPGs, IED, AK-47. Then they go across the river, right, where there was a safe haven. Nobody was on that side of the river except for Iraqis. And so we were up in an OP right there on the river one day, my team, and the same thing happened again. Boom. They go across the river. We start seeing them, but they're about 1,100 meters from us, so we couldn't engage, but we started calling artillery on them and working up, hitting them on the ground and in the air. So a VT fuse and on the ground. They just had a couple paladins, right?
Mm-hmm.
They had a couple paladins a few miles away they were using, so you only had 2 guns, but that's all you needed, really. 8 guys in canoes, and so they were good about clearing that stuff. But then eventually we had to call in aircraft. I just told them to blow up the canoes. There was nobody in the canoes, but they were in the canoes, and we had a gun run on with Cobras on these canoes. But later on, we heard the DASC complained why we allowed that, and then the RCT complained why we allowed that. I was like, they were using these things to attack us, and they escape across the river. Well, why didn't they send a patrol? Because we didn't know if they were going to get ambushed or blow us up. I could just sink them right there.
Mm-hmm.
Big deal. I was like, seriously, even the battle captain who was getting chewed out from the RCT too, he's like, look, they're using these things. We blew it up so they couldn't do that again.
Yeah.
And then they wanted to complain. Why did you authorize release of ordnance from aircraft of unmanned boat? It's like, because they were using these boats to escape. I called them
terrain denial, man.
Yeah, because the funny is, like 2 weeks before that, I had to do a terrain denial mission with the JDAM, and there's nothing on the road. Just drop a bomb here, make sure it's clear of nobody, and they drop the bomb.
That's the stuff that makes.
That's the stuff I was like, what? I was like, I hope I'm not. I don't see the big picture here. I don't see the big picture. Maybe that's okay, but I'm like, I can't blow these boats up they're using that they use to escape us when they hit us with IEDs and small arms fire and get people wounded. But I'm blowing it up on an empty bank of the Euphrates. I didn't understand that, but you salute, you make it happen.
Do what you do. Yeah, that same thing happened in Sangin too, man. That was the same thing. I was getting fire missions denied. What ended up happening at this time, I was with the advisor team, so I was an Afghan National Army advisor, which gave me some flexibility because we were under 3-4's battle space, but we weren't part of 3-4. We weren't. They showed up after us, actually. I think 2-7 was there before them, and we were with 2-7 for like a month before that. But when they so we weren't under them, but they could approve or deny American fires within their zone. Well, our Afghans have their own mortars and shit, so most of our fire missions were actually just us shooting our own mortars and stuff like that. We had a similar situation where multiple times they were denying us from striking guys that we knew were bad guys, or whatever, something was occurring, they wouldn't let us do a strike. And then one day I'm sitting here, I'm watching this river crossing, which is funny, same thing. I'm watching this river crossing, and we watch these guys cross this river every day, drag supplies across this river every day, and put it in this tree line, and they won't let us strike it. They won't let us strike the tree line because there could be civilians in the tree line. They won't let us do any of these things, even though I'm like, it got so frustrating. I was like, all right, dude, we're going to sit down. We're creating, this is an observation post up here on, I think we were at PB Shamshir Du, which is an Afghan patrol base. And I'm going to sit here and just watch that tree line, and I'm annotating everything. That way I can go, look, there's dudes here with weapons, and there's no civilians. I've been watching it for 6 hours, and that's what I did. I sat there with a green logbook, and I wrote down everything. Two military-age males in brown and blue clothing. I identified a weapon on a guy one time, and I was like, that's it. Let's do a strike. And they just would not do it. And then the next day, they wanted to do a terrain denial mission up on a ridge line that nobody's ever on, that's nothing. And they shot like 4 HIMARS and dropped like 2 bombs on it. And they're like, oh, you're in the area. You can observe this, right? And I'm like, yeah, I can observe it. And I watched it all blow up nothing. And they were like, can you give us a BDA? And I was like, yeah, you guys really blew up the dirt. They did not like that. That's literally what I said. I was like, you guys blew up a lot of dirt. And they did not like that. But I was like, this is fucking stupid. I was like, this is so stupid, man. Like, multiple times we're getting shot at, identified the shooters, but we couldn't drop on them. but then you'll drop all this ordnance on nothing for no real reason. You're calling it terrain denial, but shit, I'm out here every day looking at this terrain and nobody's crossing it.
And in Vietnam they had something similar. They called it INI fire, harassment and interdiction fire. They would just randomly shoot at like road crossings and stuff. But we didn't do that in Iraq because there would have been civilians there.
Yeah.
So we were just randomly shooting. It was dirt where nothing is, where they might have shot mortars at, a year ago or something, So that's what they kind of made it sound like. Well, occasionally there's mortars shot at here, so we want to keep them on their foot. Like, got it. I'll watch it.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong. I mean,
there's reasons, I guess. But
there are reasons to deny a mission. There's time and place, but for me, being on the ground and like being pinned down and stuff like that, I was like, I can't understand these reasons. I'm being shot at right now. I don't know. Your reasons. And one time we were getting shot at for a while, and they kept denying our my request for a. I had a British what are those, Tornado on station, and had a guy all lined up, and they denied and denied and denied, and the command did. And when I got back to the patrol base, the battalion commander was there, and I was just walking through, and he saw me, and he's like, "Hey, you're the JTAC, right?" And I was like, "Yes, sir." And he's like, "Yeah, you were like 5 minutes away from having that mission approved." And I'm like,
5 minutes?
Like, what the fuck are you talking about, man? Like, I was getting shot at. I was like jumping off of a wall because they almost got me. You know what I'm saying? Like, fuck off. That's why I just like, fuck that dude, that battalion commander.
Risk adverse in some units, that's why I was, one thing I said in Ramadi, we were lucky we had those units were aggressive. Like the first 506, man, they were fighting Marine infantry. They were tough soldiers, and their leadership was aggressive. Their leadership was smart. Funny berets aside, right? They were good fighters, and it was good to work with them, and because they had your back, part of the team, the whole thing, and it was good. Some units you go to, they're kind of standoffish, and but not these guys. They were 100%. It was good to work with them because people were dying.
Yeah,
so it's nice to get to work with them.
Yeah, and I will say for the 3-4's battalion commander, in his defense, part of his justification was we were the last advisor team there in Sangin, and after us, it was supposed to be the Afghans taking care of themselves. They're supposed to be doing their own indirect fire. They're supposed to be doing. They even denied medevac requests. There was a guy, an Afghan, that was shot in the stomach, and they were like, "We're not flying him to a medical facility. You have to ground evac him." Because you have to exercise your own logistical, it was kind of like, if we keep helping you, you're never going to help yourself kind of situation. But I'm like, well, like, this dude's shot in the stomach. Like, what are you talking about? Like, what? Is it life-threatening? What do you mean, is it life-threatening? You're asking a fucking corpsman who's looking at it through a headlamp in the desert, and yes, it's life-threatening. He's got a gunshot wound to the stomach.
People are going to bleed out. That's.
But again, I will say, I don't think every fire mission should be approved, and I don't think every, again, when I was with 3-6, I think it was India Company was trying to drop on a compound that we knew had IEDs in it. It had IEDs in it, and we knew it was everyone stayed away from it, and they wanted to just blow it up. The company did, but the battalion commander is like, we're not just going to randomly blow up buildings. I get it. It has IEDs in it, and we know that it's booby trapped, but it looks worse on us because the Afghans that are there don't know that. They just think that we're just blowing up random compounds. So we denied the fire mission, and then they tried to get around it by planning a Mark 19 shoot range, and then they gave me the grid for their target, and I'm like, that grid looks familiar, and I looked it up, and it was that compound, and I'm like, no, like, what are you trying to do? You're trying to skirt around us. I was like, the battalion commander already said we're not blowing up that compound. But yeah, I think something happened with it eventually. Like a sheep herder had brought his sheep over there, and they went into the compound, and one of them stepped on an ID and blew it up. So
not fun, man.
It's shenanigans, dude. That's the frustrating part for people on the ground. When you're on the ground and people are trying to hinder you, like trying to help yourself not get killed, When you were in Iraq, what kind of indirect fire assets were you working with mostly, or what kind of aircraft were you working with mostly?
Mostly, that was Marine Corps, F-18s and Harriers. That's mostly. Occasionally, we get F-16s show up. We had a couple of tornadoes show up, but overwhelmingly it was Marine Corps aviation. So obviously we were having Cobras and Huey gunships and Hornets and Harriers.
Yeah.
That was it. And one thing I kind of mentioned in the book, it was the issues because in Ramadi, when we showed up, when we did a switch out with the second Angel, they were like, "Look, you're not dropping a bomb in Ramadi. This is a provisional capital. You have to have a general's approval, not a battalion commander, not the brigade commander, but a general approval, right? That's sitting across the river at Blue Diamond,
Blue
and
Diamond,
yeah, and he had to have the approval, and so, but fair enough. But what else does the aircraft have? Well, they got cannons, they got LMAV at the time. It was a laser guided Maverick missile that we used a lot because it's smaller, more accurate. And then you got maybe some rockets. Sometimes the aircraft show up with rocket pods, the jets, right? But then on the other side, Hueys, and they're showing up. Huey and Cobras are showing up obviously with 20 mm rockets and Hellfires.
Mm-hmm.
All that the battalion commander or brigade commander could approve. And so we just stopped. We started requesting don't even show up with a 500-pound bomb. Show up with 2 LMAVs, because Harriers, they're limited on what they could carry. 25 mm cannon, but they show up with 2 LMAVs, if you can, as opposed to bringing up a 500-pound bomb we couldn't use. So it was smart. I mean, and I didn't do that. Some of the air officers we were with, like, let's try this. Captain Raward, he, a Harrier pilot back then, he was like, let's worked around. This is a guy who, when I go in the book, is like, if he shows up the Harrier pilot, he kind of he didn't do anything but do control CAS. He didn't want to do any other training. And fair enough. But when we got to Iraq, he became this serious guy who was like aggressive, always doing a night shift in the talk, because he was part of the SALT. That's why he had to do that. But he was getting controls all the time with the targeting pods. He was blowing up IED placers. They were following guys. I go to a couple stories in the book with him. Is he killed they dropped a bomb on some insurgents in the midst of armed insurgents. Of course, later on, CNN said it was a family wedding, but it wasn't. You obviously see the weapons in the footage, right? And so that's the type of stuff he was doing, real aggressive. And so he started telling, hey, don't even show up with 500-pound bombs. So Anglico there was good about kind of working what we had with and kind of working outside the box and improvise, adapt. And it was great to work with some of these guys. The whole Major Grice or Lieutenant Colonel Grice as a platoon commander, he's legendary in the artillery community at least, and he was outstanding today. I have there. Good group of men.
He was the Major Grice was the company commander, right, for a while for Anglico CO.
Yeah, he was the first Anglico CO was when he was lieutenant colonel, I think.
Yeah, I think later on he was.
I went to change of command, so he eventually came back. He was brigade commander, and he eventually came back. I was already out, but I know there's change of command.
So for people that may not understand, when you're talking about getting general level approval for something, it's if the target meets the criteria, that's not necessarily an issue getting the approval. It's the time. It takes time. You're adding more and more time. Like when we were in Afghanistan, it would take. I think I can't remember which RCT was there, but I could get I remember getting oh, hey, look, there's an IED in place here. From that moment to the impact of the first HIMARS round would take 10 minutes. Well, then when we got a new RCT that came in, the regimental combat team, that was the higher command, for those that don't know, they're the ones that would approve HIMARS missions and stuff. We got a new one that came in. That time went from 10 minutes or less to 15 minutes or more. For whatever reason, it just took much longer. And when you're talking about IED in placers or guys that are trying to set up an ambush or take pot shots, they're not sitting in one spot for a long time. They're moving. So if I'm looking at a target and I call it in and I got a HIMARS that I'm wanting to shoot, 15 minutes is a long time to wait because those guys can get up and move 100 feet to the right. Now I got to redo everything,
Exactly. It's and that's why you need efficient, quick, boom, boom, but that's at the time, like when we were there, first of 506, the whole 228 brigade, all of them, they were quick about a lot of things. We weren't dropping bombs, but they were quick about the other ordnance, and they approved that. And and how you had to do show of force, right? So the show of force a lot of times is I'm not going to drop a bomb, but I want this big scary aircraft to come super low and be loud and scare off the insurgents, right? And that's kind of, I think, it affects sometimes they don't know if somebody's coming. If that's all you have, maybe it kind of makes them hesitate a little bit. But after a while, they know that you're
Yeah.
not dropping. And, so we kind of use those if you had nothing else. I mean, but a lot of those units we're dropping it. But other than that, we did mortars when we were outside of the city. So a lot of times we go into the suburbs and do patrols. We were doing that Task Force Dark Eagle. We'd be out on the patrols, and we were able to use artillery and mortars there. But a lot of times we were using it mostly just for like Illume. They were shooting Illume for us. Or we were doing back then. I didn't even know they had it until I went overseas. Was the IR Illume. So it's an Illume round which you only see with your NVGs. So we were doing a lot of that. But when it came to real quick, sudden, I mean, aircraft was with us, but in hit, we used artillery a lot and mortars. But in Ramadi, it was a lot of aircraft because they can get that more precision, even the Cobras with guns, rockets and stuff. We were doing rockets a couple times. And we were ambushed. And I was bringing them in. I mean, danger close. I mean, really close. And they were good about just accurate. These pilots, man. And it was a group of guys.
We had a good working relationship with the skids, and again, I go back to Afghanistan. I was in Iraq, but I was there as a mechanic, so my I'm not that well read. Well read into the combat issues in Iraq. But in Afghanistan, I remember if we brought in skids, if we brought in Cobras or Hueys, the noise signature from those would be enough to scare guys away because they knew that's what was carrying the Hellfires. And in that area, you know how we'll joke around with like a little kid, like, oh, the boogeyman will get you. If you're bad, the boogeyman will get you. In Afghanistan, the boogeyman, what they were talking about was the Hellfires. They would joke they would tell their kids, if you be bad, that rocket will get you, kind of deal. And I heard that. I remember hearing that and being like, that's fucked up, but
it is messed up. That's a different childhood.
Yeah, so we would have to if we were bringing in skids, we would have to offset them from the target area until they were ready to do the attack or something like that, because they would burn the target area with their noise signature. Was it similar to that in Iraq? Did they have any kind of were they more afraid of one platform over another, or just didn't care?
I think technically for the fixed wing, right? The fixed wing back in Iraq over Ramadi, they're flying about 15,000 feet. 16,000 feet above until they come in for their terminal dive, their attack. So they really couldn't see them. You could hear jets way up there, right? You could hear jets over the city. You might be able to see them occasionally, but it was mostly the rotors. Rotors come in, they're a little more hesitant. But we had rotors come in, they're still shooting RPGs and machine guns at us, regardless. And it just depends on the fighters. But I think they had some, but.
It is crazy how they get accustomed to our own, just like anybody, they adapt to our own techniques. And I remember you mentioned one time that, you mentioned that doing like a show of force kind of starts to become ineffective. And I remember specifically one time we were taking rounds, we were getting shot at, and I think this was the day that we had a couple guys get killed. Afghans were killed, like the company commander and stuff had been killed, and they weren't going to let us drop, so we were going to do a show of force. That was the only thing that they would approve. And we called it in, and the aircraft was coming in, and we actually had our linguist had our Afghan interpreter had like a walkie-talkie, kind of like the Taliban used, and he would listen to their conversations and tell us.
I'd seen that. That's cool.
Yeah, and he would tell us what they were talking about and stuff, and he was like, yeah, they're telling them to stay down, that they're not actually going to drop anything. Like, they knew we were only going to do a show of force. He was like, the Taliban commanders telling the guys not to run or hide or expose themselves, to just stay where they're at because they're not actually going to drop. And I was just like, that's so frustrating, man.
Yeah, they know your ROEs better than you. That's why in Ramadi, the men walk next to women or children. If they're armed, it was tells like one guy walking alone sometimes, depending on the situation. Hey, he's PID. We're another enemy because of what he's doing. He just run across the road to grab the AK in that house, right? We take them out. But if it's a man walking with a woman or a child, we just let them walk across. But they know that, and so they use these women and children to they use their ROs against us. That's how it is. So
that'd be so crazy to like fight inside of a city like that. I mean, I've never been to Ramadi. When you call it a city, is it comparable to like U.S. cities, like actually urban density and stuff like that?
I mean, yeah. I mean, there's in the city proper, there's alleyways. There's no green. There's hardly any green space. It's either sidewalks, roads, alleyways, or small houses that are 3 to 4 stories high, or buildings for whatever reason that at one time they were used, in a business setting, or apartments. So it was all clumped together. There wasn't a lot of space. Now you can go to the suburbs where it's farms and you got a house maybe 200 meters away here or whatever the case is, but Ramadi proper, it's a city. Now we don't have skyscrapers. I think the biggest that we had a grain factory there or grain elevator there might have been like 10 stories, and that was like one of the highest spots. But that was it. Everything else was 4, 3, 2 stories. That was about it. On top of each other.
That's still close enough where you run into the issue of the urban canyons. Where you like, let's say, for those that don't know what I'm talking about, an urban canyon. If think about, you're looking at a group of road, or you're above a city and you're looking at the grid of the roads going one way and the other way. That long, like, main avenue, if you're on ground level, that looks like a canyon because you can't see anything on either side of it. Well, you have that problem with aircraft too. If they're flying over a road, as they're flying in their circle, doing, basically laps in the sky, but they have their camera locked into an area, they'll lose visibility of that area occasionally because of the angle, the slant angle of the camera and the building heights and stuff like that. So we call that an urban canyon. Was that a big issue for you guys?
Yeah, it was. It was big, especially if you're in the talk and you're doing that, and you're like, a lot of those officers are in the talk, and they're looking at the feed, the rover feed from the aircraft, right? So you can see what their aircraft sees, and they're watching it, and then you lose sight of it. And a lot of times, it wasn't that bad then, but a lot of times you start getting lawyers involved. Well, if you lose sight of it, that's no longer PID. Like, come on, it's the same dude. So weird stuff like that. But at the time, I was never really behind. I didn't use a rover. I was on the ground just talking to the aircraft, and I didn't have the rover. But a lot of our guys who worked in the talk, they did, and that would be an issue.
Yeah,
we can't see them now, so we do our southern rotation or whatever the case is. But yeah, but most of the time for me, it was like, can you see it? I can see him. This is the building, or come down this road for gun runs, or that it. So, and we started doing that Task Force Dark Eagle mission. It was a lot of that, real close in fighting, and we were using precision ordnance right on top of each other. So,
yeah, good times. That's a good time. The old urban canyon. I haven't used that term in a while.
Yeah, it was. We just, one thing with those missions was, it was just kind of developed that I didn't. When I came back I was in Al Saud for a while. I came back and I linked up with ANGLICO Det in Eastern Ramadi, and they had started working with some sniper teams with the 506. Before that was 2nd Battalion, 69th Armor, right? And then they left. First, the 506 came in. They started working with those sniper teams going out in the city, and there's sniper teams and scout teams. So for the Army back then, at least, they had snipers and they had scouts in the scout platoon. They had the sniper section and the scouts, and some were certified, some weren't. What are the cases? At least that's how it looked like to us. And so we started going out. They started going out with 4 Anglico Marines, 4 snipers, and 4 scouts, 12-man teams, and have different positions, overlapping fields of fire, and they just wait until they get compromised. And then the insurgents come out, and then they're reacting to you. And that was one of the things that kind of changed it up. So the insurgents started reacting to us going into their neighborhood. They're like, where are these guys at? And they didn't know how many teams would be out there. So they were trying to figure it out. And then you get compromised and fight, and then they come and bring in Bradleys and gun trucks and exfil you. Or if it was quiet, you did do a dismount, walk out the next day or the next morning.
I like that. Earlier you had mentioned someone didn't want to do the mount training because they didn't think it was applicable to your guys. It reminds me of when I was a team chief and I was talking to my team leader, and we had been doing a lot of HRST training, which is helicopter rappelling suspension training or something like that. Basically rappelling, fast roping, that kind of deal. And we had been doing a lot of fast roping training, but it was all very basic. It was like, you go do the tower, and then after you've done the tower, then you go and you do it off different platforms, Hueys, 53s, whatever. And we got to the point where we were doing it, a decent amount. And I told my captain, I was like, hey, sir, like, we should schedule fast rope training where we fast rope onto some rooftops, because we hadn't done that yet. We'd only been doing fast rope onto basically an LZ or something. And he was like, no, like he was totally against it. And I was like, look, I mean, the deal is that we don't know who we're going to get attached to support. We could get attached to support a regular infantry unit. We could get attached to support a Royal Marine unit. We could get attached to support, a Ranger battalion or SEALs or whatever. And if those guys on their mission are going to fast rope into a building or onto a building, that's probably not the first time our guys should be doing it. Like, we should be ready to support whatever they want to do, their insertion method. And I feel like I'm not saying we should do it every time or we should be like cowboys about it, but we at least have to work up to that because that's something we can expect the people we're supporting to do. And
you want the capability. You want the capability to support them. Hey, this is what we can do. And if you have a lot of ways to insertion and extraction, why not? It only makes you a better fighter.
Well, I think he was looking at like it was dangerous, like there's more risk in it. And I was like, I get it, but at the same time, like, how much more risky is it if the first time they've ever done it is in a combat area? Like, that's so much worse, Like, I don't want to be sliding down a rope onto a rooftop or onto a ship, that's rocking, and that'd be my very first time that I've ever done it. So, I think
there needs to be more. I think they allowed there was a lot of good training. We were doing that those small team stuff because we actually one of my first big missions in Ramadi was my team with 2 snipers attached. This was because we were going to overwatch a MSR because they've been IED in it. And so one of the first missions that 1st September, I can go into I talked to the air officer in the brigade, and he's like, okay. I just told him well, it'd be nice if we have some people out here watching the roads if we don't have enough aircraft to just kind of scan it. He's like, next day, he's like, hey, write me up a con ops for that op. Your team and then 2 snipers. I was like, okay. So I right up there in the 3-day op, drove us out there, inserted via gun trucks, patrolled to our OP or primary OP, and went about it. And it was good. I mean, we didn't see anybody that day. We were some stuff way down, but just the operations. Hey, you better be prepared to operate and work. Not operate as an operator. Your Marines doing Marine stuff. Be prepared. And that's one thing a lot of us, these first things go back then, for the most part, we were pretty prepared. I thought there was some stuff we could have done more of, like mount, but at least we got some mount.
Yeah.
There was some, we don't need to do it. It's like, you're not back at some infantry battalion. You can be in the situation. So
I understand the traditionalists look at it like, hey, you're an Anglico team. You're a support by you should be in the support by fire position with the headquarters element right by the commanding officer. And traditionally, yes, you're correct. I would probably be with the leader on the ground and directing fire support and being right next to him so he can approve. And that should be, that's the doctrinal way, right? But that's not how it always works. Like you just said, hey, we need you to go out with this sniper team. Well, if I've never even worked with a sniper team, I've never even built a hide before, am I now an asset or a liability? You know what I'm saying? Because I don't know how to be quiet. I don't know how to prep my gear for this kind of mission that we're going on,
Well, so we got that training, with those Royal Marines. It was good stuff, hiking, what to do, what not to do, how to set it up, what's a hide site versus a, other site part. And it's just, it was good. And the risk was lower. We weren't in the city, right? We were out the rural. We had a QRF at an OP about 2 miles away in gun trucks. I had aircraft on station, and we just kind of waited. It wasn't fun. It sounds sexy, right? It sounds great. It's not very fun at all. It's sitting in that heat all day.
Yeah.
Just waiting, can't move because regular convoys coming by. You're like, I hope they don't start shooting at me. So you're hidden. Although Americans go by, you're technically talking to them on the sheriff net, and it's just hey, you be prepared.
Yeah,
that's the thing. Be prepared. Get some good training, or don't put us out there. But you got to be innovative, and I think that's
innovative is key. I thought that was one of the main roles of the team chief is to make relationships with other people and to get good training for their dudes. I really tried we had a really good working relationship with the reconnaissance det that was on our MEU when I was with the 11th MEU with the Anglico team. And we would bring in their guys and teach them fire support. They had JTACs on their team. They had JTACs within the recon element, but that was like one of 6 jobs those guys had. Some of them hadn't controlled since school.
Probably not that proficient.
A lot of their books were whipped, pencil whipped just to maintain their currency. Like they hadn't actually they weren't very good at it. Not their fault. That's just not their job. So we would bring them in and teach them and bring them up to speed on fire support. And then when they had training, they'd invite us along, and we came and we did like room clearing training with the recon guys. We'd go out on the range with those guys and shoot with them, and it was kind of that's the kind of relationship that's important and that like team chiefs should be working on. Yeah, you're supposed to be looking around at all these support elements, all these people that are within the MU, the MAGTAF, the Marine Air Ground Task Force, and figure out how you guys can help each other become better at your job. And it was another thing like, we had everybody there. You're on ship. You have the pilots, you have the recon guys, you have the JTACs, you have the artillery. So we would like set up time. You have plenty of time. So we would set up full scenarios in the SAC. We'd have an FDC in the back room of the SAC set up, and we'd have like what is that called? Not SAVT, but the DVTE. It's like a laptop, like a trainer that you can do like call for fire and stuff on. We'd have that set up in one area, and have the FDC, and then have like the recon guys, and we'd bring in a pilot, an actual pilot that would be actually flying the missions, and he'd play the part of the pilot, and we'd just go through the comms and stuff like that. We'd run scenarios, and we all kind of learned from each other, and you got the guy right there. Normally, as a JTAC, I'm not sitting right next to the pilot. I'm gonna work with him for an hour on the radio, and then he's gonna fly back to wherever. Well, in this scenario, we're all here. We can do a fake mission on the computer and run through the whole scenario, and then at the end actually ask the pilot, hey, what would you prefer to hear at this? What do you think would be better in this situation? And vice versa, So I don't know. Guys got to be innovative. You saying that being innovative is very key, especially nowadays, I believe, when we're watching how warfare is constantly changing and shaping. And if you got to be ahead of that. You got to be looking at that and like, what's our next step to either counter this tactic or improve our own tactics?
And I think when we started doing those Task Force Dark Eagle missions, that threw those insurgents off for a loop, because normally all the coalition forces would do, go through their Humvees, maybe some dismounted patrols, but they weren't sneaking in anywhere. But we started doing that. It kind of messed up their OOD loop, right? So they were kind of dysfunctional, and they were making bad decisions and mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
And we started getting a lot of snipers are just dropping people left and right. We started getting a lot of direct engagements, and then dropping precision aircraft or precision bombs and ordnance on them. And we started racking up a pretty good list of these missions. And eventually, on one of those missions, we had a guy from the DoD, supposedly, right? So obviously an SF dude. And I was like, well, why is he? There's 12 of us, and this DoD guy was up. He's carrying that new Mark 7.62 machine gun, right? So what is that? The Mark, I forget now. It's brand new. It was brand new at the time, right? In 2006, 2005. And we're like, well, what's he going on? He just wants to go along with us. We've heard a lot about these missions, what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And they want to sense of it. I asked, well, where are you from? He's like, oh, I'm just with DoD. I'm like, all right.
Okay, Bob.
Fair. I know. I'm like, okay. Dude, I'm going to go tell the Russians, who you're with. And just, anyway, so he went out with us on one of these ops where we had overwatching, dropping ordnance, and then snipers were firing, and we got lucky. But it wasn't eventually till that at the very end, the insurgents realized how to counter that,
mm-hmm.
right? So how did they counter it? Is we realized that they couldn't move on us, because it's tough, as you know, it's tough to assault a defended position. So that's basically, we went firm for a day, exposed ourselves. They attacked, they made mistakes, and then we exfilled later on, right? Usually under heavy gun trucks, or sometimes dismounted. And so what they do then, eventually, they wanted to wait until we left to the exfil, and they wouldn't be there at all. They wouldn't know anything about that. So we're going to exfil. So we're not going to exfil under heavy, armor, because nothing happened all day, right? So we're going to exfil. We're going to walk out. No big deal. I realized that was our vulnerability, and maybe we made mistakes at countering that, because after I left, basically the day I got back to the U.S. from that deployment, they were on a patrol that night. It was night there, and they were coming out of a Task Force Dark Eagle mission, and they're exfilling. And as soon as they left the house, the whole team got ambushed by I think it was they estimate like a dozen. I don't know how they come up with that, but estimate about a dozen. And first off, guys killed, shot in the chest. Like one of the guys, it was one of the sniper teams we worked a lot with. His name was Joey B. And he got shot in the chest, the SAPI plate, like 3 or 4 times. But what saved him was the SAPI plate, and then his magazines. You get your magazines on your chest vest there, and saved his ass. But one guy got killed, plenty of wounded, and then the QRF that came out to visit blew the IED, killed the lead driver. And so they okay, right? That's always I go into a lot of books about how these guys were smart. The insurgents were smart. They evolved to us.
Yeah.
I think one thing the Marine Corps did kind of we all make mistakes on is when we go overseas, is like we don't think, oh, how better we are than these people,
Yeah.
how much
Yeah.
we are. I'm not talking like a racial thing. I was thinking they're third world. We're Marines. We could fight. No, these guys are experienced. They're smart. They're cunning. They know their neighborhood. They live within the time. They camouflage with the population,
Mm-hmm.
and you underestimate, you're going to get screwed up, and we did a lot of times, and we paid the price.
Yeah,
And
they're
you have,
living in it every day. You know,
yeah,
they're not doing a deployment and going home and hanging out and resting. They're in the fight every day. There's no training ops. It's all real for them. You know,
they're
and
watching, they're watching you every minute of the day, everything you do, everything you don't do. Somebody's watching it, somebody's taking notes, and they use that against you later on, like with our ROEs, all that stuff. They knew how to fight us, and they were smart. They weren't
yeah.
as well equipped, but they were smart and they were dedicated.
You don't need. I mean, you look at. I mean,
Somebody,
look how much it costs to make an IED. Almost nothing, and it's taking out hundreds of thousands of dollars of vehicles each time it goes off.
trained soldiers. Boom, that's it. And you can't even fight back. That was one of the frustrating things is that IED goes on. You couldn't even fight back, and you fight the urge to just want to shoot into the city. You have that urge almost, and it's there. Just like he's there somewhere. He's probably in that house, but you don't because you have honor and you do what you need to do. But it's frustrating. It builds on you.
Did you guys ever capture a trigger man?
And we never did. A lot of times I think they thought they would. Oh, that guy's over there, and the wire leads to there, right? A lot of times back then they were wired in, right, instead of just wireless base station. But the wired in ones would defeat the countermeasures, like the electronic countermeasures.
Yeah.
So they thought this guy was over there, but yeah, it's tough to get somebody sitting there, doing that. But you catch them with cameras and stuff like that. Then you can kind of see, okay, this guy's filming it. He's part of it.
Mm-hmm.
He might not be the one pulling the trigger, but he's part of it. He's filming it so they can upload it onto whatever, and do the propaganda. But
yeah,
that's how you get money. And I give that to the grunts that are every day searching these vehicles day in and day out, man. Those are the guys, those National Guard soldiers and active duty soldiers and Marines, day in and day out, man. They're the ones that did what they could for that war, man.
Dude, I always felt bad for the Army guys because they always it was either like 12 or 18-month deployments, like Marines had 7 months unless you were with like a higher command, like RCT. But even if you're an RCT guy, you're probably in like a base, so it's not that bad. But the regular Army infantry guys were there for 12 to 18 months at a time, and some of these shitholes, it's like, dude, I could see how you get to a point where you feel like you're just never going to get back. You're never going to make it back, especially if it's a dangerous area and people are dying, at a regular rate.
Those National Guardmen, those soldiers would just be in the heat of the day to stand on post on patrol, and, or driving his truck for miles. And it's just, man, they're the ones who really did. That was a day-to-day fight there. And it was, I know it was tough for them. 7 months is one thing. The whole year is different. A lot of those guys, that they're National Guard, they did 7-month deployment or workups in like Mississippi or Louisiana, and then they, went over to Iraq, or to whatever the case is. But there was they had I was going to have for the 7 months, but who had it easy was Air Force had like 3 or 4 month deployments.
Yeah.
It was TACPs. We worked a couple of Air Force TACPs, and they had their deployments like 4 months.
Yeah. I think Rangers did the same thing, but I will say the Rangers that were deploying like 3 or 4 months at a time were like basically hitting the ground running, and just doing straight up direct action raids basically daily. Yeah, that's high stress, man. I was gonna say there's some guys now that they can the wars are over, they reflect back. And there's a lot of bitter people about going to Iraq and stuff like that. Do you ever kind of regret being there or being part of it? Or what's your take on it now looking back, 20 years later?
Look back 20 years later, I don't regret it. I'm happy for the experience. It's an odd feeling. I'm happy for the experience, right? But I'm also like, look, people died. This was screwed up. This was a stressful time. It was a tough. It's a love-hate relationship. It's a love-hate memory. It's just reality of what I go through every day. It's a love-hate for that place, but I wouldn't change it. And to be honest with you, I'd go back today. If I've got a chance to relive that part of my life, I'd go back again. I wouldn't change it for one. I worked with some of those, some of those Marines we worked with, some of those soldiers, man, they're just outstanding, just Americana, outstanding men. And that's the big part of that I was working with them and doing some of the stuff we did. It's historical. Not that I was historical personally, just the whole thing. The whole thing was historical. And,
Yeah.
you know,
Well, you were part of the invasion. I mean, that's.
yeah, I was also part of the initial invasion, which was a completely different fight, and completely different.
And that is history right there. That'd be like, I always ask people that are part of the invasion, like, what is it like to look back and be like, dude, we like conquered a country. Like, we invaded and took over a country. Like, that's some history book shit.
It was funny because, I'm proud of that too. I mean, I thought it would have come out a lot better, a lot sooner than it did. But eventually, I think the right thing happened there. But a lot of mistakes were made there. But I wouldn't change anything. I was a young lieutenant on the ground as an FO with an infantry company. Man, that's what I want. That's what I joined for, man. That's what I wanted to do. And great Marines. I was glad for the experience. It was crazy, man. It was, we lost a couple of Marines during that, and it was a lot wounded. But it was, like I say, historical.
Mm-hmm.
It's historical, and I was glad to be part of it.
And I think people that like want to criticize basically any involvement there tend to forget that a lot of those fighters that we fought and killed, they came from other places too, and they knew the game. It wasn't like Bob was protecting his neighborhood. It was like some dude from fucking Syria is coming to Iraq to get his jihad on, and he knew the game. We knew the game. A
lot of stuff. But one thing I said about those, I kind of go in the book is a little bit of it. Those fighters were, it was a big assortment, right? But they knew what it was. Those whole civilians, they knew what all that was, and it was a tough thing for him. It was a tough thing for the civilian because he's caught in between this behemoth, occupation force, and then he's also caught between the extremists. That if you help the occupation, they're going to cut your head off because you're an apostate, or if you help the insurgents, you're likely to get killed eventually, right? And it was a tough spot for them. Those who left. There was a lot of vacant houses because people went to Syria or they just left completely. Mm-hmm. A lot of people couldn't afford to leave. Some people had no choice to stay. Some people wanted to stay to fight. But, a little bit different is initially you feel bad for the civilians, but then I'd see IEDs get in place right by them, and then those civilians saw it, and those civilians see a Marine patrol come, an Army patrol trying to get, somebody gets killed, and they don't say a word. So you start kind of, my empathy with them kind of starts getting, lacking as the deployment goes on.
Mm-hmm.
My deployment goes on, I get started very lacking. Where these guys, they know it was there, they didn't say anything. If they said something might get killed, I get it, but I'm sorry, those guys are still killing your kids too, and but eventually, with the whole Ambar awakening after we left, I think the stuff happened the right way. Of course, ISIS came in and screwed it all up. So
yeah, one of our biggest issues as a nation when we get involved in shit like this, like I think we were completely justified to like strike Afghanistan and stuff, but I also think that we hung out there for way too long. We got into this rotation of 20 years of wars, of 1 year wars, basically. These guys, every year was different. No one could tell you what the strategic end state was. And I don't think very many senior officers wanted to end the war, at least until they got their deployment in, so that they could say they deployed and they went to a combat zone. That makes a lot of people's careers, right? So there's some incentive there to not end it. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, definitely. And hey, I totally agree. But it's, but for the soldier, the Marine on the ground, you're going through that. It's not the politics of it. This is your life, and you got to deal with it, right or wrong, good or bad. You got to deal with it.
You're in this position, yeah.
You're in this position, and that's why I kind of put people who I don't like that. Fair enough. If you don't like it, I don't matter. I'm going there, and I have to deal with what I'm given and deal with what I'm doing. And maybe I support it, maybe I don't. There's definitely times, you see that stuff going on. I'm like, what are we doing here? This is all about attrition. How many did you kill? And what are we doing? Because there was enough people in Ramadi after we left. They actually did that surge, right? And so they were able to put more bodies in Ramadi. Then they started setting up outposts all over the city. Then it started to provide more security. Mm-hmm. And that security helped bring apart, the end of the fighting that it became. But we just didn't have enough bodies there. And that's not the soldiers. That's some general up there or some, civilian up there that says, well, we don't want to go that many because it looks bad on the polls or whatever the case is, man. I don't. You need more bodies there.
That's why I don't really put too much faith into what generals or whatever senior leaders in the military say right now, because it's like, bro, you were the guys that lost the war. You know, I mean, that's it. It was senior leaders in the military. If you're a colonel and above, and during the GWAT, you should be kind of ashamed of yourself if you never spoke up and asked, what's our end state here? What are we doing? Because you're the fucking reason that it happened, and nobody got fired. You know, there were incidents where people got fired for certain things, but I mean, look at the pullout of Afghanistan. No one got fired for that. No one got relieved. There was nothing. We lost 13 people there. We killed an entire family that last drone strike on the way out. The administration lied about it and said it was the terrorist group, and then it ended up being aid workers and like 7 kids or something. And no one got relieved or anything like that. And had we done anything similar to that in like Marja, Sangin, or anything, everyone involved would have gotten their dick slapped by the command.
If you would have been on Camp Pendleton and shot outside of your safety box, somebody usually got fired.
Exactly.
Somebody got fired. But that's what I'm saying. There's no accountability. At least looking down, you know, I'm a 51-year-old vet. So I'm just, you know, what do I know? But looking up, man, it's sad, man. It's no accountability.
I think if there's any senior leaders listening to this, they really need to be introspective about the whole fucking situation. You know, understand your role in this, and I get it. You got to play politics and all that crap. There shouldn't be any of that in the military, but that's like wishing that it shouldn't never rain or whatever. It's just not reality. There's going to be politics there. But if you continue the bullshit and let guys continue to deploy and go get killed for what? You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know. It's very frustrating. And it's frustrating when you hear senior leaders say, how we should trust them, and you know, so these generals all agree with this course of action and this and that. And it's like, fuck those dudes, man. You know, like a lot of those dudes are the reason why we lost. You know, if you were involved in this stuff and you don't have the nuts to say that this is wrong or we shouldn't be doing this, or why am I sending my guys to this area? What's the strategic value? You know, we look back at like some of these Medal of Honor incidents that occurred with like the Army, and the only reason some of these incidents even occurred was because the Army put their dudes in super shitty situations. They put them in this fucked up situation, and a bunch of their dudes got killed. And now we're gonna talk about how they're heroic and stuff like that, and throw an award at them. But I'm pretty sure those guys would have rather have been in a more defensible position and have their buddies still with them, rather than having a fucking Medal of Honor. You know what I'm saying? Like,
I get it. Yeah, it just seems like there's no, like I said, no accountability, and those that there's some things I think they could have done is, like, if you think we need more bodies over here, then say that, and if they don't get it, then tell yourself, you know, I'm gonna quit. This is how we win. We win by having this amount of people here. We can provide the security, and we can hand it over.
Mm-hmm.
If you're nickel and dime it because you don't want to go over 500,000, whatever the case is.
Yeah.
This is minimalism. It just loses that.
Yeah, once you're in it and you see the game, you're like, oh, we can only have 10,000 troops here. And that's why they send 5,000 contractors, so they can say they only have 10,000 troops there. You know,
well, they're bringing the MEU because the MEU doesn't count as the body that game.
Yeah, as long as they're there less than 90 days or some shit like that, they don't count towards the overall troop count in the country. Yeah, it's like,
you know, so the politician says, well, we don't have. Yeah,
it's crazy, man. It's so crazy, and it's just like I don't know. It's very. I never really thought about it until afterwards, and when you kind of see, I don't know. It's just very frustrating. It's just very frustrating to see that it's like that, and that. And the other thing that it kind of opened my eyes to are the warmongers that want to talk about we should go fight Iran, or we should go and fight Syria, or we should do this and that. But they have no skin in the game other than advocating for other people's children to go to a war zone. You know what I'm saying? If you fucking want to send my kid to a war zone, there better be a good freaking reason for it. You know, like to just go get involved in some shit to help your own political career or something like that. It's immoral and it's gross, you know, and it's just disgusting. It's
there seems to be some type of lack of leadership somewhere, because one of the things is, you know, we all go in the military, we give up certain rights, and then you expect that justice, part of the JJ did tie buckle, right? Wasn't that the acronym we used? is one of the things in leadership is justice. But are you really getting that when you only hold some people accountable, but you don't hold other people accountable? How does that look? How does that look to the junior Marine or the some young staff NCO or officers like, I'm fired, I shot out. This guy lost $5 billion.
Yeah.
And when he's not fired.
How many Navy captains or admirals get relieved every year for stuff for loss of confidence or whatever? They never tell us what had actually happened, but it's all these loss of confidence things. How do you not lose confidence in some of these assholes that fucked up these wars? You know what I'm saying? And like, it's crazy. But I'll get off that.
That's it. But yeah.
So let's talk. I was going to say, for the book, man, I know you started writing it basically around the time you were starting to get out of the Marines. Tell us about like the process for you finally putting it together. Maybe someone out there is trying to think about writing their own book. How did you get a publisher? Like, how does that work?
Okay, so I started writing stuff down when my daughter was born. I was like, look, this is stuff I need to remember. I knew it was historic. I wanted to write stuff down that I could remember. So I also had a lot of after-action reports, unclassed after-action reports. I contacts with people, and just I was able to write a lot of stuff down. And I didn't write a journal; I didn't have that.
Yeah.
But we also had a lot of videos, and I had a lot of ability to retain the information. And so I started writing it all down, and gradually more and more, I just wrote. If you're gonna write, I tell to veterans all the time, look, tell your story somehow. Tell it on a podcast like this. Then it's here forever, so your kids can hear it, grandkids can hear it. Write it down. Do what you got to do. Tell your story. This whole silent professional, I think it's good when you're in active duty, but when you're out, these are experiences that people need to be told. These are everyday Americans that are heroic and courageous and doing things that some of these people in the world country right now would never think of doing, right? What they sacrificed. And we need to tell our stories. And that's one thing I wanted to do. And I thought, ANGLICO is such a crazy unit, awesome unit. I wanted to put it on paper. You don't hear much about it. This is what we did. And whether it was ANGLICO or not, the experiences that team and I had was memorable to me. And each one of them, probably agrees. And all that stuff was crazy. Your deployment memorable too. But we were doing some of that stuff in Ramadi and what it was and how crazy it was there. And I wanted to write about it. And I just thought those stories of those Marines and the soldiers we worked with, and that Task Force Dark Eagle was great. And I wanted to write it. And I think I started just slowly writing, putting it down on paper. Fine. And then I'd go a couple of years without writing, right? When my kids were real young, I just didn't write. I was just busy on, kids, how it is. And my wife and kids. And then I started picking back up. And then finally I was like, you know what? I need to get this done. I turned 50, last year. And so I was like, I need to get this done.
Crazy.
And so finished it up and did it and sent it out. And, one of the second publishers I sent it to, he's like, I like it. Let's talk.
Who do you reach out to for something like that? I mean, how do you even know?
Well, you look for publishers who might be specialized in what you've got. So this is a military nonfiction, a military, memoir type thing. You go who kind of specialize in that. And some big publishers have departments that specialize in that. So there's a certain person you contact. Some are small publishers, and you look at the books they publish. Oh, there's a lot of military memoirs. There's a lot of military nonfiction. So you kind of maybe they have the app, and that's what I did here. Is Kohler's Publishing, and they're good. They do a lot of small books. It's a small publisher, but they sell a lot of books, and they work with veterans. They're out of Virginia. They contacted me and made it happen. And I actually tried to send it to Jocko Willings. He has a publishing company.
Oh yeah.
I sent it to him. I heard back from whoever runs that stuff over there. Hey, I like the story. Send me the rest of it. So I sent it. And this is before it was the same title and everything like that. And I never heard from him. I had to make a decision with Kohler, and so I went with Kohler, and then that other publishing company sent me letters, thanks, this is good work, but we're going to go a different way. He's like, sounds good. I'm already publishing it anyway, so.
Yeah. Now that it's done, you should send them the finished copy of it and be like, let me be a guest on your podcast.
I want to sell books, because that's the thing too, is Justin's like, it's one thing to write a book, but it's a completely other thing to promote a book. And, you had Isaac Leon, that guy is a promoter, man. He's always doing something. I can't go, I got some good signing stuff coming up, because the book actually will be available April 12th. It's available for pre-order now on Amazon, but it won't be available for purchase until the 12th. And but he's doing signings, he's out there, he's doing what you need to do. And so That's what it is.
Yeah, it's self promotion. It's you very much have to be self motivated. I don't think a lot of times people don't really understand how hard it is to run like social media accounts or do this kind of self promotion. You know, it takes time to come up with posts, to come up with different things to talk about, to go on podcasts and not sound redundant. You know, like I've had people on the show, like I had Dale Comstock come on the show, Delta operator. And before he came on, I listened to a couple of his episodes from other podcasts, and they were like almost identical. Like he'd already told the story so many times he had it. And if you listen to that first episode I do with Dale Comstock, I interrupt him a bunch. Someone actually commented like, "Stop interrupting your guest." And but the reason I did it was because I knew what he was getting ready to say, and I wanted him to be either expand more on it to get more detail out of it, or to not just not sound like every other. Because if I've heard your story on this podcast, and I go to another podcast, you're telling the exact same story. Why would I listen to it? Because I've already heard it all. So it's like, I don't know. It's a whole game, self-promoting. I imagine it's tough with a book. I mean,
initially I had some anxiety when writing the book about like, great, what's everybody going to think? What are these guys think?
Who am I to write this book?
Who am I to write this? What are my buddies going to think? I can imagine the comments.
Yeah.
To be honest, that's what buddies do to each other anyway. But in the end, I was like, you know what? When I'm an old man, at least older than I am now, I'm going to think I should have done this, I should have done that, and like this is a good thing. My kids can have it forever. It's why not? And and I stayed positive. I don't really go negative on anybody in the book. It was just about what was going on, and that's I'm glad to do now. But now it's the kind of self promote, right? Click on this, check this out. I get it. It's a different thing, but you got to do it. If you want to sell the book, you got to do it.
Do you think you'll sell more paper copies or like digital copies?
Well, I don't know. I don't know. I don't have no. They've been pre-ordered now, and I don't find that number up till later on anyway. But I don't know. It just depends. People have asked for like the audio, but that's a different one. You got to pay someone to do that, or I do it myself. And then I've heard people say that's a pain in the ass to do.
Yeah, because you got to read the book like a million times to do retakes
it's gotta be perfect
and
stuff. Yeah, so and you got to have somebody edit it and everything, and
you can
maybe
do it.
I think I can.
It's a time thing, though. It's like I can change my oil, or I could go pay someone $20 to do it, or $30 to do it.
That's it.
So,
but once once they agree to the publisher, you sign a contract, and then they give you your book number and when it'll be published and everything like that. And then they do have a few rounds of editing, which was interesting, and they were good. They shortened a lot of stuff that needed to be kind of shortened. It's kind of tough though to see your work kind of get cut. Like what happened? That was a great story. Like, no, but this was they professional. And they kind of keep it in order. And I think they did a great job, and it's been really good. I mean, they don't really do promotion for you. They don't promote you really, except for own small stuff. But you kind of do most of the promoting.
You know what would be cool, and I don't know if this is a thing already, and if it's not, then everyone heard it here first, is for the digital copy of the book. I don't think you could do this right now, but for like digital copies of like military books, wouldn't it be cool to like submit a FOIA request and get like video from your strikes and have, how there's always photos of your deployments and photos in the book? Why not, if it's a digital copy, why not insert a video into that instead of a photo? I mean, I wonder if someone's doing that.
I'm sure you could. You have to have that through the cloud, or how I'm curious how it would be part of the download of it, the movie.
Yeah, you just have to embed it into the video somehow, or into the book
pop
somehow.
Up on something like YouTube or something. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, I got quite a bit of video too, and but I didn't want to. I didn't even put much pictures in I put a few pictures in, but.
Oh man, what are you doing? Marines can't read. You got to throw more photos on there. What are you trying to do?
Side of crayons, man. Got to get some crayons. And then the came out, and then they send you some copies, and then But one thing I liked is it was neat working with some of these other people who've published books, and you kind of go out to them and say, "Hey, can you read my book? Here's an advanced copy," and do a comment, right? So Scott Husing of Echo and Ramadi, and Fred Galvin of A Few Bad Men did it. Isaac, and there's a few more. Like I said, General Neller, the 37th Commandant. Yeah. He did it. He read it. I don't know if they read it all. I get it. We're all busy.
Yeah.
And they gave a pretty good blurb, and some other ones too. And it was
Are you adding any of those to like the beginning of the book, like
yeah,
their feedback?
the new one's coming back. It's coming out. Yeah. So the electronic copy you have, it doesn't have it because I didn't have those yet. So
Yeah.
that was there. Send it out to people, and but the new one coming out when you buy it, it has all the reviews. It has some quotes on the
Do you have a social media page dedicated to the book?
I do. So on Instagram, it's just running to gunfire, just running towards gunfire. Sorry, running towards gunfire. If you just Google it or whatever it is on Instagram, running toward, it'll come up. Also on Twitter, running towards gunfire, as well as on Facebook.
That's awesome, man. And you said the book comes out in April, but people can pre-order now.
Yep, comes out April 12th. You can pre-order now. You can also go onto my website, which is jason-angel.com, Angel with two L's, and I have different links there for you. It has the intro for the book if you want to read the intro now. It's a good website put together, and you can also buy it. Eventually, I think I'm going to have some signed copies because that's kind of a logistical nightmare for if you have to sign them and send it off.
Yeah.
But I'm going to have some. I'll sign if people, because I've had some requests already for some signed copies, and I've sent some out already, but we might have those available as well.
That's awesome, man. Well, everybody needs to go check that out. Support fellow veterans and stuff. Get those stories out there. I think what you said earlier was completely true. It's the same reason I started the podcast. I know too many people that did so many cool things that no one will ever know about, just because it's not something that gets put in history books. History books are like wave top, very big events and very big names, and that's really it. But the average Marine sergeant, JTAC, or staff sergeant, or corpsman, or whatever, that are out there every day doing their thing, most people will never hear about their story unless they come out and tell it. And I think it's great when people like you come on the show and, give us a detail. And not only because it preserves your own story for you and your family and stuff like that, but it also informs the taxpayer of where their money's going, what the military is actually doing. Because most people don't know. Most people don't have a connection to the military like they did, 75 years ago. It's not the same. So this is a good way to inform, the American public of how their taxpayer money is spent overseas and stuff. So I really appreciate you coming on, man. Everybody could, like I said, I'll put your show description I'll put your link in the show description. Everybody can check out my website, jkramergraphics.com. My Instagram is @formeractionguys and @formeractionnews. And that's it, dude. I really appreciate it.
Oh, man. Thanks for having me on, Dustin. I appreciate it.
Yeah, dude.